here we go. So, hello and welcome to our very final webinar that we are hosting as part of the CoPower project. Michael will give an introduction to the actual project in a minute, but before we do that, I will quickly introduce you to the agenda that we have planned for today. I will give an introduction to what a virtual power plant actually is. After that, Michael, who is from Ernact, the lead partner of this project, will give you the introduction of the CoPower project. And after that, we will have 4 pilots that were part of CoPower. The first one is from the University of Oulu. Terho will talk about optimizing energy consumption in a residential house with PV, IoT, and lots of smart devices. After that, Runa Untersson from the University of Iceland will talk about residential houses with PV and battery energy storage in Iceland. Followed by Paul Early from the Donegal County Council in Ireland, talking about virtual power plants at public authority buildings in an Irish perspective. And finally, I will talk about virtual power plant and battery energy storage at a biogas plant and a cow farm in Finland. That's the thing. And if we are basically on time, we will do it so that after each presentation, there's a 1, 2, 3 minute time for questions. That's the plan. So you can basically, after each one is presenting, you can ask questions. That's the idea. Now someone is waiting in the lobby. Now I don't know whether
I let Rina in.
Yeah, that's very good. Thank you. Okay.
Hi.
Hello. Okay, so I will start by talking quickly what a virtual power plant actually is. A virtual power plant compared to a traditional power plant is very much focused around renewable energy sources such as wind turbines, solar photovoltaic, biogas plants or hydropower. And especially these all combined. So when you have one wind turbine located somewhere, it doesn't matter where, that alone does not basically qualify for a virtual power plant. But when you have a wind turbine connected to a software system that is also connected to the internet, and it also is connected maybe to some kind of energy storage system, and you can charge and discharge this energy storage system, you might already have basically the term virtual power plant qualified. But the basic principle is that you have always software involved. You always have some kind of demand response involved. That basically means an incentive to consume electricity when there is enough produced, and maybe to not consume electricity when there is a shortage. And that basically means, for example, on a day where there's very little wind in the system, the wind power production is low, and then normally the electricity prices are high, especially in countries with a lot of wind power installed. Or on the other hand, in countries where you have a lot of solar PV installed, a day with a lot of sun might lead to very low energy prices, electricity prices. And that means there should be an incentive at that moment when the electricity is cheap to consume it. And that's a demand response thing. Or you charge the energy storage system so that at the end of the day, when the sun is going down and the solar PV production is low, the energy storage system is then discharging the power to the grid. And all of this combined would be a virtual power plant. And quickly, what are the elements? And that's it. So there's always software involved, and quite a lot of smart software solutions that include, for example, the prediction of electricity consumption, the prediction of electricity production, maybe the prediction of the future electricity price for the next 2 days based on weather forecast, these kind of things. And then normally there should be an energy storage included, for example, a battery, but it can also be pumped hydro or compressed air storage, which will then be using electricity fuel cells or flywheels. Yeah, and then very important is this grid connection, so that you have always the connection to the grid and also the pricing signal from the grid. So that basically means this fluctuating prices on the wholesale market that vary in Finland, for example, every 15 minutes. That's really important. Yeah. But okay, let's not go too much in detail. I will stop sharing and I will give the floor to Michael. And Michael will talk about our project.
Thank you very much, Fabian. I'm just sharing that. Okay. Hello, everybody. My name is Michael McBride. I was the project manager for the CoPower project. If I joined Ernact in March of 2025, so I got on board this project at that time, and have been involved for about the last 18 months. So it's been a very enjoyable project to work on, and very fulfilling when we see the actual projects being delivered, or the pilots being delivered. So first of all, CoPower was funded by the EU program, Northern Periphery and Arctic program. So we're very grateful for the funding of this project by MPA, and they provided a budget of just short of 1.5 million euro. The start date of the project was June 2023, and we just finished up the final date on May 2026. So the aim and objective of CoPower was to develop community-based virtual power plants in a viable business model to support it in 5 communities in Finland, Iceland, Ireland, and the Faroe Islands. We have 2 instances in Finland. The overall objective is to use transnational cooperation to exploit information technologies to link multiple small energy systems and operate them in coordination like a utility scale power station to balance electricity demand and production. And Fabian is after giving a high level overview of what a virtual power plant, community virtual power plant is. Our partners are the University of Oulu, Centria, both of which are located in Finland. We also have partners in the University of Iceland, Donegal County Council in Ireland, and Nordsø in the Faroe Islands. The key milestones of the project: in November 2022, the applications were submitted. I do want to highlight that because at that time, the concept of like a power plant, it's become a very, let's say, common thing throughout all of the regions. So it's not unusual now to see solar systems on roofs, etc. They're all very common now, at least in Ireland, and I believe in most countries. In 2022, this was a fairly new technology, so the idea was to explore the opportunities to make it more efficient and to, as we said, create virtual power plants in the different regions. The project officially started in June 2023. The pilots were all established successfully on all 5 locations during 2024 and 2025, and the project officially ended in May, as I said earlier. I am employed by Ernact. Ernact is a European digital transformation network that connects public authorities across Europe to drive innovation. We lead proposal development for EU-funded initiatives and manage the end-to-end project development process from concept to successful implementation, supporting smart, sustainable, and inclusive regional growth. We identify EU funding opportunities. We build strong international partnerships, this being a very good example of such a partnership. We develop secure competitive projects, manage delivery and compliance, and ensure investment delivers local impact. This is a map of where our many partners are located. We have currently 18 live projects with almost 50 million in total funding, and we're very proud to say that over 17 million has been directed to the Northwest. So that's a significant development opportunities that we've realized in the Northwest of Ireland. In this project, we were the lead partner and project manager. So my role was leading and coordinating the project partnership, hosted bi-weekly online calls to review management issues and share knowledge and challenges, which were very productive, and we had total buy-in from all our partners on those calls. We monitored the execution of activities according to what was planned in the application. We ensured reporting, and we were the main contact with the head of the secretariat in the NPA. We also attended lead partner seminars and other related organized events hosted by the NPA. So that was a summary of both what CoPower is and what my role was. If you want to get more information, I have on the screen the website, so you can visit that website if you want to get more details. I'm going to stop sharing now and put the call back to Fabian. Thank you very much.
All right, thank you. All right, so the next speaker, I will give again basically a short introduction to Terho. Is called Optimizing Energy Consumption in a Residential House with PV, IoT, and lots of smart devices. And Terho, together with Marko, are both from the University of Oulu in Finland. And Terho, I guess you should be able to share your screen. Let me stop sharing and let's give it a try. And then here we go.
Try. Can you see my screen now?
Yes, that looks good.
Okay.
All right.
Okay, so hello everyone. My name is Terho Isennu from University of Oulu, and I'm related to the project in a way that this pilot is actually my house where I live. So I've been working quite a lot of these automations and things that I have installed at my home. And here's some short introduction to the pilot site. So it's 160 square meters house, 1.5 floors, and the heating is the main power using component in northern region where we live. I have like 1200 liter hot water heater. It stores the energy to be used to heat the house. And then I have also this sauna building, and it's my workplace, office, and sauna. And let's start with the heating automation, the most important thing. The hot water heater, the original way that it has been working is that it has been heated during the nights when the price of the electricity has been cheaper, and then the heated water is circulated through the floor during the daytime. And now, especially when I have the solar panels installed, there's of course wise to use the solar energy to heat. So I've installed these cell devices which can utilize or which can be programmed to heat when it's the electricity is the cheapest. And there's also temperature monitoring sensors installed, so the system can know how hot the water is in the heater. Also the flooring. Initial, we have those thermostat installed. The basic thermostat that were originally installed, those are like just heating when the floor temperature goes down in the room, and I upgraded those with the Shelly devices that can be programmed to do all kind of things. For example, the most one critical thing I found out is that I have also the air-to-air heating system, was that the floor wasn't heating at all, so it got quite cold, especially from the side of the rooms. So this can program, for example, heat every morning for 1 hour, even if there's no other need. And this also allows lots of optimization to be done. Also, basic electric radiators can be upgraded to be so-called smart radiators. I installed also those Shelly devices there. They basically act between the electricity coming to the radiator, and they cut the power from the radiator when the room is warm enough, and we can use different separate Bluetooth temperature monitoring devices to monitor the temperature of the room. So those can be placed in the optimal place in the room to get like the best reading of the temperature in the room. And with these, it's possible to, for example, to lower the temperature in the room when there's nobody during the daytime in the rooms. Also, the electric floor thermostat, I had a couple of those were also upgraded to have smart capabilities and to be able to heat when the electricity is low and things like that. Then the air heat pump control. I have the air-to-air heating system installed in my house, and it's really great saving the energy, but sometimes it's a little bit hard to optimize it. So with this kind of smart control systems, you can also control that and make it work seamlessly with other heat sources in the home. Then to go a little bit through other automation that I have installed, I have smart sensors reading the doors, for example, to see when somebody comes into sauna building. And one example of the uses of those is that for the weekdays, the sauna building starts to heat up after the night. And if nobody's coming, then it can shut the heat off earlier because it knows that nobody is coming to office that day. And that can be done automatically to save energy. Then, for example, air ventilation can be upgraded. The system also can, nobody's home, it's wise to lower the speed of the air ventilation. And it can be also increased based on the sensor giving the information about the CO2 levels in the, or if somebody is going to the shower and it detects there's high humidity, it can increase the level of the ventilation. I'm using the Home Assistant, which is open source system to monitor and save the data from the system. So that has been working a couple of years almost now, and it has been quite reliable system. And it's basically you can install it for free. So the good thing is this Home Assistant system is that you can always, it gets lots of like upgrades if there's new automation things popping up. Almost always somebody writes the code for that to be implemented in the Home Assistant. So it works almost with all of the automation things that you can imagine. Then I installed some Shelly devices to monitor the electricity consumption for the project. And then I have a couple of smart screens installed that can be used to control a couple of things and also to monitor, for example, the temperatures around the different rooms. Then the photovoltaic system. So there's the 8.9 kilowatt peak system. And for the last year, the total production was 6,800 kilowatt hours. So it was performing quite well in line with the prediction how it should be producing. Of course, there's some trees you can see in the picture on the right that are blocking the sun during the morning time, so it's not giving as much energy as it would be. Also on the down, you can see one issue that we have up in the north is that during the winter time we have the snow covering the solar panels, so we don't basically get any. Yeah, at least three months of the year we don't get almost anything from the solar system. And here I have some numbers of the solar system. So total production was 6,800. So price-wise, it was around like 500 euros. From that, we used that site around 60%, and the price of that was like 400 euros, and 40% was sold to grid with like around 100 euros payback. And with those figures, if it continues with similar fashion, the payback time will be around from 11 to 13 years, depending if you calculate, for example, the average inflation to the price. Total energy that we bought from the grid was last year 21,200, and we actually calculated that 18% saving in energy cost was achieved with the photovoltaic system. There's still some room for improvement. That, for example, the usage of the electricity from the photovoltaic system can be used more in the water heater, and so I have a lot of those automation, but there's still tuning to be done to get the most of the system. And here's like the conclusion of the energy usage. So from this, what we can see that the grid energy usage went down by 7% after the upgrades, but actually the total energy usage increased around 11%. And I think the main culprit for increased usage is the increased excess free energy. That now when the solar system produces some free energy, it's easy to use that to cool house, and also a couple of times I'm filling the swimming pool with the hot water. It was heated with the solar energy. So, but yeah, that's short presentation about my pilot. If somebody has now some questions, I'm glad to answer.
Yes, I have one question.
Yeah.
Regarding the CO2 sensor, can you get any information about when your ventilation unit filter is dirty?
No, I don't have that, because in this case, actually what I've done is this is really old and how to say stupid system. And what I did in this case is I just like made automation for it so that the speed can be changed with the Shelly device. So there isn't any monitoring in this air ventilation system, but there's only the control which can change the speed of the unit at the moment. So,
all right. Can you easily compare this data information about, for instance, you have 5 persons in house and CO2 level, compare it like previous data. So then if you see that CO2 level now is higher despite of higher ventilation unit speed. So
yeah, the system. I haven't been doing that actually. I haven't had too much time to tune this air ventilation system control, but because I have this monitoring system, so basically all the data is saved into the Home Assistant, so I can check from there. All the data can be checked, including also the CO2 levels. So I think this is one of the key elements when you are building some kind of automation is that you need to have some kind of data and storage for the data, so that you know if you make some changes, you know that how those will affect, and are they like improving or not. So yeah.
Yeah, thank you.
All right. I think we have to move on. If we have time left at the end, maybe if someone else has other questions, we can come back. Next, well, I'll give you again a short written introduction. So next is Runa Untosen from the University of Iceland talking about residential house with PV and battery energy storage in Iceland. And yeah, Runa, you should be able to share your screen. At least we tested it with the others.
Is it working? Are you seeing something?
Yes, it is. Yep. All right.
Okay.
There you go.
Super.
So
Yes. Hello. Good morning. Maybe first, before I start, so the presentation that Terho just gave, it's pretty similar to what I have. So, but I decided to take a little bit different twist. But I've seen the same, pretty much same behavior, same everything. So Oulu and Reykjavik are pretty close in the latitude. Anyways, so I decided the key message. So the key message of my presentation is rather simple. So a small residential pilot can have much larger impact than expected. So don't judge the size, it's a small one, but we learned a lot. And to understand why, let's look at the Icelandic context. So Iceland is in a very unique position. Our electricity is almost all entirely renewable. So we have either hydro or geothermal electricity, and most of our house heating is also from geothermal. So electricity is not used for heating except in very special cases. Prices of electricity are relatively low. I know that Finland is cheaper than we are right now. But the system is also isolated and highly centralized. So we cannot ask anyone else to help us. We have to take care of our system ourselves. So naturally, the question is, so why are we even talking about distributed energy or virtual power plants in Iceland? And then that's the question where our work starts, because the answer is we are basically solving a different problem. In most countries, virtual power plants are about replacing fossil energy. In Iceland, that problem has already been solved for both electricity and heating. So the question becomes, what is the role of distributed energy in a system that is already renewable? And what we see is the motivation is different. It's about integration, it's about resiliency, it's about increasing self-reliance. You remember we are isolated. And cost savings playing a supportive role. It's not the main. And cost is always a part of the discussion. People always ask us, what's the payback time? But it's much harder to put a value on resilience, integration, and self-reliance. How much worth is it to you, for example, to never have a blackout? Well, it depends on why you are sensitive to the blackouts. And in practice, those are often the real drivers. And that's exactly where community-based energy systems and CVPPs become relevant. To understand how this actually plays out, we need to take a little bit closer look at the system. And this is similar to what you saw from Fabian. A simple illustration of what we mean by distributed energy. Few houses connected to a local generation, storage, and the grid. And it's a small example, but the idea is the same. You can scale it up, and it's always the same units. So instead of everything coming from one large centralized plant, energy is also produced and managed locally. And in Iceland, the challenge is not to replace the central system, but to integrate these types of local systems into it. Because once you remove the climate argument, the question becomes what actually motivates people. And like I said, so what we see in Iceland is a different set of drivers. It's the resilience, especially in the rural areas. It's the visibility. People want to show that they're renewable I often make fun of because we are basically renewable, but solar panels somehow makes it more visible. It's the flexibility. Can better make use of energy if we have, for example, battery energy storage. And of course, also increasingly the self-reliance. Even in a fully renewable system, people still want to control their own energy, less dependence on the grid, more local control. And increasingly, this is not just about individual, but also about local community level energy systems. But actually making this work in practice is not straightforward. Even though we have all these solutions, it always takes some time to make this work. And that's actually in this project where we found the challenges. What we found is that the challenge is not technology. The technology is there, it already works. The real challenge is around the system. Regulations were not ready. Installers, electricians had limited experience. And sometimes, most importantly, there were no reference systems. So you could not go somewhere else and see how did they do this? Because no one had really done this. We only had this in small 12-volt systems in RVs and so on. So the question for us is simple. How do you move forward in a system like this? And instead of starting large, of course, or complex, we took a simple approach. And this is what all the partners more or less followed. It's just small manageable projects and residential settings and other, like in Finland, they had farms. So the approach itself is not unique, but the context here in Iceland, it is. And most systems, these solutions are about replacing energy. So here, we're not only producing energy, we also change or looking at how we interact with it. So in our case, we selected a residential building, also my building like Terho, with real users connecting to the grid with PVs, battery storage, and monitoring. And the goal was to observe how the system behaves in practice, not just the technology, but also how we interact with it. And so the system setup or like diagram of the system was this. So we had 3 apartments, we had solar panels, we have 4.3 kilowatt installation capacity. Battery storage is 15 kilowatt hours. And then we have inverter that works both on off-grid and it's both grid tied and off-grid. So if there's a blackout, it can continue. And then we added a weather station because we wanted to monitor the sun and everything and see the production later on, so collecting data. So the real system, something like this is far from being optimal. Optimal degree on rooftops in Iceland is about 45 degrees. It's sometimes we could even have them vertical because it's all 44 degrees or something close to 45. So going vertical or could also be one way. That way we get rid of the problem with the snow and also get more reflections from the snow in the winter where we have the least production. Yeah, so those are the panels that are on one side of this, both sides of the roof. You see only one side here. And then inside we have inverter here. The image on the left is the inverter with breakers. I will talk about them a little bit later. Then the middle image shows the battery storage, so 2 7.5 kilowatt hour batteries. And the right one is the weather station, solar powered. And I managed to run it to the limits, so it went out in middle of December. Yeah, so this is our system. And we run this and try to understand how everything behaves. Of course, collecting data and seeing how things the dynamics of the whole system. And later, our plan is to develop better or develop control strategies. So how do you share the energy? You cannot have one user who just takes up everything. But yes, so looking at the dynamics here, you can, for example, see a snapshot one day. You see on the upper graph, there is a blue graph, what do you call it? Time series. That the blue one is the production of the sun. And then the orange one shows what is going in from what we're buying from the grid or injecting back into the grid. So if it's negative, it's going into the grid again. In the morning, early in the morning, I'm charging an EV. So, and the green one shows the energy going into the battery or out of the battery. If it's negative, it's going out of the battery. So during the night, I'm charging the battery, I am charging the EV, and then during the day, I'm using the sun to fill up the battery again. But all this timing of all these events, at least the charging of the battery and charging the EV, this is something I've been playing with for a long time, and I have no real conclusion of what is the best. It also depends on the time of the year, how much sun, how much energy I'm getting from the sun, and so on. And in addition, normally we have a fixed price in Iceland, electricity, but I'm working with a startup company that gave me 30% discount between, I think it's 1 and 6 in the night. So that's why I charge the car there also. But we're collecting data so we can work with this later on. So we implemented system, we faced some real challenges. Even experienced electricians had never installed this type of systems before, so they took their time to learn. They had to figure everything out as they went. Integration took time, regulations were not always clear, and we did not let that stop us. So when there were no regulations, we adopted Danish regulations, because normally Iceland adopts either Norwegian or Danish regulations. And in some cases, even standard solutions did not work for our needs. And that slowed the project down. But still at the same time, it built competence needed for future installations. And I would like to show you one example. So the image here on the right, you see the box. There's a box with 2 red trigger switches. This came, we bought the system from Denmark, so it followed a Scandinavian setup, included this safety box that disconnects the PV panels when the grid goes down, meaning no electricity during a blackout. That makes sense maybe from a fire safety perspective, but for us, it removed the backup functionality entirely. So we modified the system. We introduced breakers to disconnect the house from the grid and manual switches for safety. So the manual switches are now above this box here on the image on the right. And on the left, you can see what we have is a switching unit at the breaker box where the electricity goes into the building. So we disconnect the house from the grid if there's a blackout, meaning I can run the whole house with electricity disconnected from the grid, which is what we always wanted, because this is what we wanted for people who are experiencing these blackouts in the north of Iceland. But this is a very good example so it's not always a technology issue, it's also just adapting the needs. So there may be different needs in one country, even though we're using the same technology. And once you start working like this, we realize something quickly. One solution does not fit all. What works in one country does not necessarily work in another. That's the needs. Very often in Reykjavik, we get this, we need to, we get this ice on the cars, on the windshields of the car. You get the same on the PV panels, but less frequently. But I know this is frequent in Oulu or Finland, is that we get also snow on the panels. This goes rather quickly away during the day, most often. It's very rare that this is a problem. And they still produce a little bit even though there is snow on top of them. But this is exactly, in my opinion, where project like NPA becomes important. It's not just about transfer technology, it's also learning from each other. So to conclude, the technology is ready, PV works, battery works, control systems work. The real challenge is everything around the technology, regulations, experience, coordinations, processes. And this is exactly where pilots like this become important. And it's not just theoretical, it's exactly what we observed. So the goal of the pilot was to develop and demonstrate a working system, that we did. System became a reference point, not just for our adaptation and researching into this, but we had a very good partner, Alor, who began to use this installation to demonstrate solutions to customers. And that triggered a chain reaction. Soon after, farms, companies, public buildings, even one of the ministries, Minister of Energy, we were able to show this and they followed. So they have now installed, some are installing. And more importantly, those projects reflect exactly what this project is supposed to enable: more local use of energy, increased independence, and so on. So real projects. Those projects have now realized since we started this project, and in many ways, our small pilot was used to both build confidence but also experience, so that we were able to run and go ahead with this. It's a clear shift, I would say. So before CoPower, we had few PV systems, low awareness, but it has really changed in those 3 years. So I would say it's really worked. So, but why? Because we had a real system. We had a very strong partner, Alor, who really helped us. And we also had other fundings. The funding for this did not cover the PV panels or the whole batteries and generate inverters. We had to find other sources of funding for that, but we found them. So to sum up, regulations often lacks skills and experience, of course, really matters. Implementation takes time. Planning and design is not enough. You need to understand the system when you install it and operate it. And this, we have had to do a lot of modification after we installed. But yes, farmers are really the key adopters in Iceland. They are now becoming more reliant on electricity. They have these robotic milking solutions and other solutions that really depend on electricity. Yeah, so key takeaway: small pilots can trigger large systems changes. Thank you.
Yeah, Runa, thank you. We are a bit over the planned time, but let's still allocate maybe one question. If someone has, please go ahead if someone wants to find more information.
You're also welcome to send me an email. So.
Okay, if no question, then we could move on. Next is Paul Early. I will quickly share my agenda yet again. Oh, not this one, sorry. Here we go. So, Paul will talk about virtual power plants at public authority buildings in an Irish perspective, and Paul is from the Donegal County Council in Ireland. Paul, here we go. And yeah, let's try to have this within 10 minutes if possible, so that I can sum up. Paul, are you mute? Let's say, give it a test. Say
Sorry,
something.
yeah, I'm just shared there. Just let me bring it up here. Just a
Oh yeah,
second.
okay.
Can you see that?
We can see ourselves, so you're sharing your team screen.
Okay, this is not a good start.
Oh, no, if it doesn't work, I can
Yeah.
share your presentation, but we can give it a few more seconds.
Actually, would you share the presentation there a second, Fabian?
Yeah, yes, why
I'm
not?
working off a laptop here that is not.
Yep, yeah, I'll do that. All right, just a second. Okay, here we go. Now, let's see that I go to the right one. Yep. So basically, Paul, just let me know when I should go next. Then we can do it like that.
Okay, no, it's fine. It's just that my laptop froze. Yeah, hi. My name's Paul Early. I work in Donegal County Council, and my pilot project was to basically install the pilot in a site just outside of Lifford in County Donegal, which is in the northwest of Ireland. Just to follow on a bit from what Runar was saying there, our issues are slightly different. The drivers for our pilot project were that it's to reduce emissions or under a national strategy by 2030. And also the fact that resilience and blackouts, we suffered a number of major storms there about a year or two ago, and they brought down the entire council infrastructure in terms of electricity. So out of all our buildings, only 2 buildings had backup in them in terms of diesel generators. So that's all being looked at the moment, and this pilot is contributing to that review. But basically, the site was in a place called the Barracks, which is an old army barracks outside Lifford, and there's 5 buildings there at the moment. And you can see the opposite. So the schematic is there, and it shows the overview of the site. And there's 3 buildings there: the admin block, the officers' mess, and the locker room. And the admin block has 2 solar plants on it, which is 15 units each, and one of them powers the locker room, which is about 200 meters away from it, and the other one then is a 6 kilowatt plant on top of the officers' mess. We're also intending to put in a 70 to 100 unit battery on that site, and this is all covered by the VPP and the software. So it's just a schematic of the software with the weather forecasting being brought in, and also the inputs and outputs from the main grid and the electricity price. There's also a number of DERs in this pilot as well, distributed energy resources in Letterkenny, museum and art centre, and a theatre, and they have their own solar plants as well and their own battery power. So if you want to go on to the next one, Fabian.
Yep.
Just to give an overview of our campus, and we're sort of looking at this pilot as an influence over the entire campus. We should be looking at Donegal County Council as an entire estate, not as building by building, and that's where the VPP comes in. And we currently have about over 2,000 connections to the grid, and that's a collection there of libraries, fire stations, museums, art centres, leisure centres. There's over 52 and counting. 13 of those sites currently have solar installed on them and very little battery power. You can see here under Dunlow PSC, that's a public service centre where a lot of customers come in, do the business and leave, and that's open 5 days a week. In 2025, through solar, that generated 17,402 units, and it generated 41,000, over 41,000. The total is the generated and the exported. So we ended up exporting 23,000 units back to the grid, while at the same time we were consuming 25,000 units from the grid. And Donegal town was a bit better in terms of we only exported 6,000 units and again 9,000 units in the barracks. I suppose the point of the project is that in order to reduce emissions, we should be using all the renewable energy that we're using and exporting none of it back to the grid and counterbalancing the emissions that the grid is emanating from. I'm just going to bring up the actual software itself and just go a quick demo of that. I'm just going to go sharing for a second here if I can, Fabian.
Yes, sure. So let's try.
This thing. So does
Yep.
that? Okay,
Yeah, it
good.
works. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, so this is basically the software. Again, there's multiple different software applications out there that can do something similar to this, but this is the one that we picked during a procurement process, and we amended it to for our own needs. But that's basically the all the sites, and obviously you can add in as many as you want in terms of DERs onto this platform. I'll just go into one of them. There's all sorts of information on this, the grid carbon intensity tracker, whereby you can decide when to import your electricity. So you can basically do your load balancing. So you can revert back to the battery during a time when the grid is generating electricity with a large amount of emissions. And you can decide to import your electricity only at a time when the carbon intensity is lower. This is obviously the electricity pricing if we ever decide to trade electricity. We just go on to, if we just go on to one of the buildings on the site. Sorry, it's I have to blame this laptop here. Go to one of the buildings on the site. And just go to the locker room. One of the main outputs that we discovered is in each of these buildings they have air source heat pumps in them, and the air source heat pumps were basically consuming about 80% of all the electricity consumed in the buildings. They hadn't really spotted that before because there's no smart metering on these sites. So one of the first things we did was install sensors or meters to measure the entire energy consumption from the grid coming into the building, and then a separate meter to measure the electricity consumption by the air source heat pumps in the building. And so this is obviously highlighted an issue around the configuration of the heat pumps. Should they be consuming that much electricity? Why are they consuming electricity all year round? So the VPP is upsourcing loads of questions around this area. There's the energy load, again, both the grid and solar combined by the on the sites. So lots of information in all these applications. I suppose as Runa was saying, it's more the learnings that we got from it. And I'm just going to go back to the, can I go back to the presentation there, Fabian?
Yes, sure. I will then share again, basically where we left off. This one, should I go to the next slide?
If you go to the next slide, please.
Yep. So
yep. Again, we've covered all that before in terms of what is a community virtual power plant. So if you go to the next one. So again, this is just on the site itself, and we've discovered that about in terms of the overall energy consumption on the 3 buildings, about 50% in 2 of the buildings, and the officers' mess, it's about 25% is coming from the renewable. I guess if you can go on to the next one. And these are just, again, like the other guys were saying as well, the patterns are pretty common across all the areas in terms of, you know, huge, the grid consumption goes way up from about September onwards. And then during the summer months, it goes way down, and that's replaced by solar consumption. And again, our main participation in this is driven by a reduction in the emissions. Like about 70% of all home heating in Ireland at the moment is based on oil. So we do have a problem with emissions in this country. And if you go on to the next one, you can just skip through these, conscious of the time, Fabian. So that is the battery schematic that we're putting in. And again, we're just going to use one battery to power 3 buildings. And basically, battery will come on during the day. It will be powered at nighttime from the grid at a low rate. And that will be used then as a workhorse during the day in each of the buildings at peak times, so that we're taking the pressure off the grid and we're just reverting back to battery power for a number of hours in the buildings. And then obviously during the summer, the battery should be powered completely from solar, and the site should be basically operating independently off the grid at that point in time. If you go on to the next one, Fabian, please. So that's just the schematic.
Next one.
Yeah, please. That's a battery system overview, and again, we'll just go to the outputs from the project. Sorry, that was just the best practice in terms of demonstrating a lot of people have concerns about battery power, large batteries within buildings, etc., on sites. And I was trying to offset those worries by showing a demonstration of the Wood Hotel in Sweden, where it's a 20-story wooden hotel, and they've got 5 batteries in there, where their fire protection system is completely dependent on the battery power. And if we go to the next one. So this is just, again, the outputs from the project. And again, we just want to demonstrate right across the campus, number one, that you should look at, if you're installing a virtual power plant, from our perspective, you need to look at it as, how does this work on multiple buildings across an estate, in terms of how you can, again, the load shift, how you can move from dependence on the grid to battery power, how you can manage the consumption and generation differently, what the role the battery has within your whole planning. You need an intelligent system design, and that's just how you plan your investment in solar and batteries, and how that works in terms of the number of people that are going to be using your buildings, and target what money you have available in terms of investment. Over capacity can be as bad as under capacity, because there's incentives at the moment to put in solar panels onto buildings. But as we've seen in other areas, those incentives decrease after the initial investment, in terms of over the coming years, they'll go down from whatever it is, 18 cents a unit now to about 5 cents a unit. So, and then data is the key. I viewed this more as a data project rather than an energy project, because it's all about managing the data. And when I looked at the data we have around our energy, it's not very clear. And in terms of trying to make planning decisions around it, again, it comes back to understanding the data, understanding your energy patterns, and understanding your drivers. And for us, the drivers were to reduce emissions, and also to have a backup in terms of blackout. For example, the council were going to invest in 36 diesel generators for the buildings after those recent storms. They're now looking at this instead, influenced by this pilot project, of using batteries instead as backup, instead of investing in diesel generators. So that's pretty much me, Fabian.
All right. Yeah, then I'll stop sharing, and I'll move. No, well, now we have, of course, we are already at the end, but I still have my presentation. But let's still say, is there a question for Paul first? Let's do it that way. If not, maybe I'll start with the last one, and then we are ready. Okay, so last but hopefully not least, and sorry for now getting a bit over time, I will talk about virtual power plant and battery energy storage at a biogas plant and a cow farm in Finland. And this is basically Sentria's pilot that we did. Our pilot was located at a biogas plant and a farm, like I said, and it was located in a quite large biogas plant in Sykäräinen in Finland. So basically, Centria's part is a very remote location. There is a biogas plant producing around 75 kilowatt of electricity constant 24/7 by burning biogas in a CHP engine. And the electricity is usually consumed inside the farm because the farm is rather big. It has around 300 cows, 3 fully automated milking robots, and the consumption is usually so that during the nighttime there's not so much activity on the farm, and that basically means the electricity consumption of the farm is less than the production of the biogas plant, and that means there is usually, during the nighttime, electricity sold to the grid. And during the daytime, when the cows are more active and the milk robots are more active and the feeding system is more active, there is a lot of electricity consumed, and the biogas plant cannot keep up with the production. So that means the farm buys electricity from the grid, sometimes quite much. Sometimes the consumption is over 150 kilowatt. So the idea was then we install a battery and of course a control system and an automation system so that we basically cover the nighttime surplus in a battery and give it back to the farm during the daytime. But of course, the system can do a lot more. So there is also the possibility that we do this kind of short-term trading. If the spot price is very high, we can sell to the grid and these things. But okay, in order to keep the time, I will already go next. The battery that we procured for the project has a capacity of 70 kilowatt hours, and it has a maximum charging and discharging power of 12 kilowatt. So that basically means, basically the battery you can see on the lower right picture, the battery is way too small for the farm. But of course, this was a pilot. We just want to demonstrate that this works. We don't want to solve the whole Earth energy problem in this project. But yeah, we got at least a working principle. The biogas plant, 55 kilowatt, not 75, like I said earlier. It can maximum, our output is 75, but usually it's basically 55 kilowatt electricity consumption 24/7. And then the farm's consumption, like I said, it usually goes down to 45 kilowatt during the night and 80 kilowatt, sometimes 100, 150 during the day. And in total, the farm still buys about 10,000 kilowatt hour per month from the grid. This is an example what you can do with a smart control system that we have basically installed and a battery energy storage. These 3 mountains, which is the BES, so Battery Energy Storage System State of Charge, are basically from if you fully charge and discharge one full cycle of the battery, and then all the graphs in between are way more complicated. But what you can basically see is that when there is excess electricity available, we can charge the battery. When there is a shortage of electricity, so basically that means that the farm would buy energy from the grid, we discharge the battery. That's the most simple version. And then it gets more complicated, but that's not shown in this picture where we do this kind of intraday trading and all these things. But this is the most simple and most easy to understand system. So the battery is used mostly for that. And then it gets, because we had a pilot system, we have of course developed our own dashboard and own measurements, and we have quite a bit of sensors installed. We of course take the electricity spot price of the Finnish energy system into account for the software. Then we take the biogas plant net power into consideration, and then we make certain decisions what to do with the battery, whether we charge the battery or whether we discharge. Now the lessons learned. This slide is about the technical part, and the next slide is going to be about the business side. So first of all, what we did, we made our own software. And I don't recommend to do that unless you do some very simple system, but our system was surprisingly complex. So I do not really recommend to do that if you want to trade energy on the market. If it's just for your own use, you can of course do this home automation system, and that's totally fine. But if you want to trade energy on the wholesale market, it gets complicated. So you should really do that as a business and not as a side cover. So it got really, really complicated for our system, I have to say. The good thing is that these VPPs, so the virtual power plants, are really getting common in commercial and industrial applications. And that's something we have learned in the last 3 years. That in the beginning, when we started the project, I haven't heard about this very much. And now you really hear about that. And that's an excellent news because they really support the grid. And they also really support the energy efficiency when they are in use, because when there is surplus energy, it's used, and that's really important for basically the smart grid and also the low prices in the grid. But the technical aspect also has one clear drawback, and that's that security issues are a real threat, because now we are talking about critical infrastructure. And that's not so nice because everything is software-based, so if the software is not maintained properly, this can lead to security risks. The last thing, and then I'm done, is the business side. VPPs are really getting commercially successful, not only in our pilot, because this was a demonstration, but really in normal commercial applications without subsidies. VPPs are getting common, and that's nice. And really important to keep in mind is that the payback time for our system, for example, is around 10 years, but it can be even shorter if this VPP, so the virtual power plant, is participating on a reserve market. That's a very complicated topic. I will not go into detail, but it basically means there is additional revenue possible by participating on those markets. And normally you would need an aggregator, so that's a third-party service provider that does this trading on the market for you. You cannot do it yourself. All right. That was my part, and now we are over time. So, well, maybe we can, if there's a question, we can deal it, and I think then we will call it a day. But is there any? Let's do it like that first. Doesn't look like that. Is there any general question to the other guys?
Yeah, Fabian, just I'd like to ask just the key partners, yourself, Toro, Marco, Runar, and Paul, just to hold the line for a few minutes, not to drop off. Just one or two administration things I'd just like to check with you, if that's okay.
Yeah, but maybe we can conclude this. I will stop the recording. Just a second. And if